Hey everybody, it's Chris from Beer Bearings. Welcome back. It's Friday again, and we're back with another beer of the week. This week, I'm wearing my Jazz Fest shirt again because we are in the second weekend of the Jazz Fest season. We're hoping to have an actual festival in October. I talked all about that last week, so I'm still celebrating Jazz Fest in place, as a lot of us are, with WWOZ and lots of good food that is available around town that is normally served at the festival. But we're hoping to do that in October. Meanwhile, I'm here with a beer that was suggested by a Facebook group member, Brian Dunn. And actually, Brian initially suggested NOLA Breakfast Brown, which is not available right now. And I said, hey, how about a backup plan? And he said, how about New Holland Dragon's Milk? Not strictly speaking a Gulf Coast beer, in fact, not at all a Gulf Coast beer, but it's such a great beer, and he's a group member, so I absolutely decided to go ahead and do it. It's easy to obtain down here too. So let's talk about that a little bit. It is Dragon's Milk. It is a bourbon barrel aged stout. It's 11%, so it is a high gravity, high alcohol beer, and one that is more of a sipper than a chugger. It's certainly not one you might want to have at a ball game, depending on how you want your afternoon to go. Let me open it and talk about it some. I've had it sitting out for a while, hence the coaster, to try to capture a little bit of moisture. We've talked about high gravity beers before a little bit, and the fact that they will give up some of their secrets as they get warm. So I'm going to just pour a small amount. Again, 11% is something that you want to be careful with. So we'll talk a little bit about how it's made and get a taste and all of that. So let me give it a swirl for you and a look and some impressions. So I would call it very dark brown with a nice kind of tan, persistent tan head. There is a great video on the New Holland website that I will link to. They will show you a little bit more about their process and how they do it. But we're going to talk through at least the barrel aging bit as well. So let me get some impressions here. Again, bourbon barrel aged, so I would expect to get some bourbon-like characteristics out of it. So things like vanilla, for example. Some of that comes from the oak as well. Definitely some vanilla, almost getting a little cherry, which is not uncommon, a little chocolate too. Very complicated. This particular one was packaged back in March of 2021, so not terribly long in the package. Vanilla, chocolate. I would say what I would just call kind of dark malt character. Very tiny bit of a hop bite right at the back end. Vanilla from the bourbon. Tannins, a little bit tannic too. Again, spent some time in oak. So really complicated stuff. So barrel aging of beers in second use barrels, which is what this is actually relatively new. I might get one more taste. And boy, that's good. And again, as it warms, you can start cold and it will taste one way and reveal certain things to you. And then as it warms up, it will continue to sort of reveal its secrets as it goes on and change in flavor. So definitely look out for that. Aging in second use barrels has really started to take off in the last, I can't put a number on it, maybe the last decade or so in beer in America for sure. Barrels are very old, hundreds of years, if not thousands of years old. You know the process, wooden staves, they're fired, they're bent, metal hoops are put around them, all by hand. Requires a lot of skill, requires a lot of attention actually to keep a barrel working and in good enough shape to use and use again. So that's another thing that is in short supply. Coopers are kind of hard to come by these days. But certain products have traditionally been produced in and aged in wood. Wine is a big one, obviously whiskey of various kinds. And in America, bourbon whiskey is required, if you're going to call it bourbon, is required to be aged in American new oak barrels. So it's a single-use product. They can't really use it again to call it bourbon. Those barrels have lives downstream. They go to single malt distilleries in Scotland. They go to beer producers now to have beer aged in them, and also things like maple syrup. So there are all kinds of uses for barrels downstream of the first use. In this particular case, these guys get their bourbon barrels from Kentucky. They don't specify exactly which ones. They probably get them from a variety of producers. So the beer will be brewed. It will be fermented all the way through its process until it's ready. It is specifically formulated to be barrel aged. So the brewer is going to be looking for and trying to impart specific characteristics, maybe use of a lot of darker malts like chocolate malts, coffee malts. I don't know the specific recipe for this one. They also mentioned flaked oats in their video on their website, which is going to impart some extra body to it as well. And after that beer is finished, it will then be transferred into individual barrels where it will sit. And in their case, they mentioned for a minimum of 3 months. And you can certainly age longer than that if you'd like to, or less time than that, although 3 months seems to be kind of a sweet spot for most of the brewers that I've talked to. They'll blend it all back together in a large blending tank or an aging tank, and then package it. And in this case, they're packaging in 12-ounce bottles. It's 11%. 12 ounces is probably more than you want to have yourself in a single sitting, even of this beer. So find a friend. And any bigger format than this, you definitely want to find a friend. So as it sits in the wood itself is going to impart some character to it, just like the wood does to whiskeys and bourbon in particular. So particularly vanilla flavors, some tannins from the wood, those are the two standouts that usually come. So the bourbon itself is going to also impart some flavors depending on which bourbon it is, and they will choose very carefully the barrels they use to do it. So certainly more caramelly sort of flavors, more vanilla perhaps, depending on the bourbon. It could be all sorts of things, but you definitely get a bourbon character out of this. So those two things are going to influence the final product. These beers will be different from year to year a little bit, even though I'm sure they try to keep it fairly consistent within certain parameters. It's just a process where when a beer is put into wood, there are a number of things that can happen, and each barrel is going to be a little bit different. The blending is all part of that to try to drive consistency as well. But this product is going to be just a little bit different from year to year, which makes it one of the cool things about the process. Talking about as an introductory beer, you might not think that an 11% imperial stout or a big stout that's been aged in bourbon barrels would be a good introduction to beer for people who don't like beer or don't typically drink beer, but I kind of think it would. I think people who are spirits drinkers, people who are bourbon drinkers, for example, are definitely going to be able to connect with the bourbon flavors that come in from being aged in the barrels. And I've also, and in fact, they mentioned on their video about red wine drinkers, I've also thought of that as well. I often recommend a beer like this to people who typically drink red wine in particular. If you're a white wine drinker, I'm going to take you a different direction. But if you're a red wine drinker, we might actually start with this. It's very complex, very many layers are going on here. And again, it's a beer that rewards a little bit of sipping over time. So get a cold one, pour yourself a little bit, let it sit for a few minutes, try it again, try it again, try it again, and you'll find that different flavors start to express themselves. So this actually is a pretty good introductory beer for somebody who would tell you or might tell you that they don't like beer that much. Also, this is one that's going to age pretty well. So any high gravity beer, any high alcohol beer like this will stand up to aging relatively well. Scratch that. Maybe not any high alcohol beer, certainly one that doesn't have a lot of hop presence, although even barley wines, as we've talked before, will age fairly well and give you some really interesting vinous character, and maybe get just a little bit more soft over time. These are the same way. So they come in 4-packs. They're available locally. If you can stand it, buy a 4-pack, drink 3, keep 1, drink 2, keep 1, whatever it is, and come back to it a year from now. Come back to it when the next batch is released and see how it's changed. I think you might be rewarded. Speaking of which, May 1st is Dragon's Milk Day, so I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. It's a happy circumstance. I actually didn't plan it this way, but this is when they do their pre-order release for 2021. So you definitely want to, If you have friends in the Holland area, not New Holland, but in the Holland area where New Holland is, that's definitely something that you can do. You can call up all your old friends you went to college with, or you knew from some other connection, and see if they'll get you some of this stuff, that some of the varieties that are only available at the tap room. It's actually pretty widely available too. So this I bought here, no problem whatsoever. It's at 504 Craft Beer Reserve. It's at Elio's and other places around town. You can even find it at grocery stores. As far as pairing is concerned with this beer, they talk about pairing with a bread pudding on their website. I can absolutely see that. Nice, thick, rich dessert. You might even do that a la mode, and have some of that creamy sweetness with it. Obviously, vanilla flavors in here are going to complement something like vanilla ice cream really well. That's an easy get for this. So I think we're talking about desserts here. I think we're talking about kind of a late night sipper. Maybe it's your last beer of the evening before you decide to head home, or maybe you're already home and you want to enjoy something a little more indulgent. So that's what I've got for this week. Thank you, Brian, for suggesting that. I might get one more sip here. Thank you for suggesting that, and it's good. Caramel, the first thing I get now is caramel. So where before I might have gotten some vanilla, it's caramel, it's chocolate right now. And again, it's gonna reward constant sipping. So definitely do that if you find yourself with some. Thank you very much for joining me this week. If you are watching me on Facebook, I would love it if you would invite your friends to come join the group and get in on the conversation. If you're watching me on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel. And wherever you're watching and whatever you're doing, tell me how your week in beer has gone, and I will see you right back here next time on Beer of the Week. Thanks so much.